Jeremiah, did you rape a 94-year-old woman?
No.
What was that?
No.
You didn't do that?
No.
So what is this?
No, man. No. Rape better, man.
Somebody broke into your neighbor's home.
Yeah.
And attacked her.
Right.
What goes through your mind?
Scared to because you don't feel safe. It's really scary. You never know when somebody can break in your house.
It's sad. Nothing like that be happening in the neighborhood, really. That's sad. That's sick. I don't think it deserves to live.
Take a closer look at the top of this surveillance footage. The young man you see sneaking behind a woman, hiding behind cars, and preparing to strike before retreating is 22-year-old Jeremiah Taylor from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Jeremiah Taylor was no stranger to the justice system. Just weeks after being caught on that footage, he would allegedly commit one of the most disturbing crimes the city had seen in years. On March 5th, 2026, Baton Rouge patrol officers were dispatched to East Black Oak Drive after receiving a report of a violent sexual assault. Inside the home, they found a 94-year-old woman hospitalized with broken bones and severe trauma. Investigators determined that the perpetrator had forced his way into her home, exploiting her vulnerability. And when the suspect's identity was revealed, the community's worst fears were confirmed. It was Jeremiah Taylor. What makes this image even more chilling is that it wasn't the first time Jeremiah had acted this way. Just a few days prior, he had escaped prison after his own foster mother had been a victim of his sick and unspeakable act. And now, he is caught on camera stalking yet another woman. Little did anyone know he was moments away from committing one of the most shocking crimes Baton Rouge had seen in years. But before we focus on the scene of the crime, let me take you to the city where this horrifying crime took place.
When you're looking at one of the most vulnerable parts of our population, the elderly, to take advantage of them in this way, horrendous, unacceptable. I don't know what word you really use. I'm really dumbfounded to try to explain it.
This is Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a city of wide Mississippi waters, live oak trees, college football, and communities that look out for one another. But even here, darkness can invade the most ordinary streets. Jeremiah Taylor was 22 years old at the time of his arrest, but his troubling history stretched back years. Public records and testimony indicate that even as a juvenile, Jeremiah displayed inappropriate and predatory behavior. At 16 years old, while living with a foster mother, he entered her bedroom, fondled himself, and justified his actions by saying he wanted to see how a grown woman feels. She pressed charges, but because of his age and the complexities of juvenile law, the case did not result in significant consequences. However, this lingering pattern of concerning behavior would only resurface years later. Growing up in Baton Rouge, Jeremiah was shaped by a city of contrasts. Baton Rouge is known for its rich culture and history, but it is also a place where systemic challenges persist. Neighborhoods with limited resources, high poverty rates, and institutions stretched thin. Within this environment, Jeremiah transitioned into adulthood, but instead of stability, his life began to spiral into crime. By August 2024, Jeremiah was just 21 years old, yet he had already drawn the attention of law enforcement for serious offenses. Earlier that spring, in May 2024, he was arrested twice on burglary charges. These arrests marked the beginning of a troubling criminal record and placed him firmly on the radar of Baton Rouge police. However, the arrests did little to deter his behavior. Instead, they became the first entries in a growing list of encounters with the justice system, each more serious than the last. By 2025, his crimes escalated. He was arrested and charged with sexual battery and second-degree battery, facing multiple counts tied to incidents involving prior victims. The charges reflected a disturbing pattern of violence, and prosecutors attempted to build a case against him. However, the process was complicated. One of the key witnesses, a victim whose testimony was critical, could not be located. Without her, the prosecution's case weakened significantly. Despite the seriousness of the allegations, the charges were ultimately dismissed in January 2026, and Jeremiah was released from custody. This dismissal, rooted in the inability to secure testimony, left many in the community frustrated and fearful. It also set the stage for what would come next. Jeremiah's freedom, despite his history, meant he was able to re-offend, leading to the horrific March 2026 case involving the 94-year-old victim. On January 13, 2026, 22-year-old Jeremiah Taylor walked free from East Baton Rouge Parish Prison. His release immediately raised concerns in the community, and within weeks, neighbors and investigators began noticing troubling behavior. Surveillance footage obtained by the WBRZ investigative unit captured Jeremiah lurking in a neighborhood, stalking a woman, crouching behind parked cars, and appearing ready to strike before retreating. These actions painted a chilling picture. The threat was not hypothetical, it was real, immediate, and escalating. And it won't be long before reports came in of a violent attack. On March 5, 2026, patrol officers were dispatched to East Black Oak Drive following a report of sexual assault. Inside the home, they found a 94-year-old woman brutally attacked, suffering broken bones and severe trauma. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors confirmed the extent of her injuries. Investigators quickly identified the suspect. It was Jeremiah Taylor, the same young man who had walked free just weeks earlier. According to police, he had allegedly forced his way into the elderly woman's home, committing one of the most shocking crimes the city had seen in years. The attack occurred in broad daylight, shattering the sense of safety in a quiet residential neighborhood. What should have been an ordinary afternoon was transformed into a scene of fear and disbelief, leaving the community stunned by the audacity and cruelty of the act. Remarkably, the victim survived the ordeal, though she required immediate medical treatment to address her injuries. But what makes this story even more chilling is the pattern that preceded it. Prior to the March attack, Jeremiah had already violated a protective order issued against him, barring him from coming within 100 yards of a previous victim. Despite police being called, the warrant for his arrest was not executed. Within 51 days of his release, Jeremiah allegedly attacked another vulnerable individual, highlighting an escalating pattern of behavior and the consequences of systemic lapses. The victim herself, described by neighbors as warm, sociable, and full of life, had done nothing to provoke this assault. She was someone's grandmother, neighbor, and friend, a pillar of her community. Her life, built over nearly a century, was nearly destroyed in an afternoon of violence that could have been prevented. Authorities moved swiftly. Using tips from the public and investigative leads, authorities were able to track Jeremiah's whereabouts and movements. Acting swiftly on the information received, officers arrested Jeremiah in the very neighborhood the assault had taken place, ensuring he could no longer pose an immediate threat. He was booked into the East Baton Rouge Parish Jail on multiple charges, including first-degree rape, second-degree battery, cruelty to the infirm, and obscenity. He was held without bond, pending further investigation and court proceedings. Neighbors expressed outrage, fear, and disbelief. Many called for the harshest penalties, emphasizing the vulnerability of the elderly and the betrayal of public trust.
Jeremiah, did you rape a 94-year-old woman?
No.
What was that?
No.
You didn't do that?
No.
So what is this?
No, man. No. Rape better, man.
A horrendous crime put a 22-year-old back in jail tonight. Police arrested Jeremiah Taylor for allegedly a 94-year-old woman. Alexis Maroney is in the newsroom with details on Taylor's criminal history.
Michael, Sylvia, at just 22 years old, Taylor had already been arrested for battery and burglary. And now he's back in jail for similar charges. Neighbors say this is a sleepy area. A lot of people on this street are elderly.
We bought this little house when we got married, and we've been here ever since.
Jackie Hernandez lives near East Black Oak Drive.
Most of the time on this end of our subdivision, it's fairly safe.
That's why Hernandez says she was shocked to hear that a 94-year-old woman a street over was
horrendous act and crime.
Early Friday morning, Baton Rouge police posted this picture of a suspect at the 11,000 block of East Black Oak Drive in the Park Forest, Sherwood Forest area. Somebody broke into your neighbor's home.
Yeah.
And attacked her.
Right.
What goes through your mind?
Scared to because you don't feel safe. It's really scary. You never know when somebody can break in your house.
By Friday afternoon, police had arrested 22-year-old Jeremiah Taylor.
I have a lot of trouble even finding the right adjective to describe such a horrendous act.
According to arrest records, Taylor has previously been arrested for burglary, battery, and
And it is a source of frustration.
that victim had a protective order against Taylor, but then he was released in January when the charges were dismissed. Police say they're tired of seeing the same people arrested for the same thing, time after time.
Why this has happened and some questions that I would love y'all to ask the rest of the judicial system. The evidence is pretty overwhelming in this incident when we're looking at everything from security footage.
Hernandez says she hopes this unfortunate incident leads to more security in the neighborhood. Does it give you peace of mind?
Yes, it does. If we had more protection out here.
Taylor is facing multiple charges, including obscenity and battery charges. At this time, court dates have not been set. I asked District Attorney Hiller Moore why previous charges had been dismissed. When we get a response, we'll put it on our website. That's WBRZ.com. In the newsroom, Alexis Maroney, WBRZ News 2.
Baton Rouge Police Chief Moore stated,
Within just minutes of us releasing those photos, the public reached out to us and was able to give us information about the location of the suspect. Our detectives then went and were able to arrest the suspect within just a few minutes in the same vicinity. When you're looking at one of the most vulnerable parts of our population, the elderly, to take advantage of them in this way, horrendous, unacceptable. I don't know what word you really use. I'm really dumbfounded to try to explain it.
public sentiment demanded accountability and systemic reflection. How could prior arrests, protective orders, and warning signs fail to prevent another assault?
It's just horrible, Satan is busy, and it is just bad. Stuff like this don't usually happen around here. Everybody looks up, that was a sweet woman.
It's sad. Nothing like that be happening in the neighborhood, really. That's sad, that's sick. I don't think it deserves to live, honestly. Cat, that ain't enough. That ain't enough. You still can walk around. That lady ain't even gonna ever be right again after this.
You're lucky you didn't catch him. You reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. You reap what you sow.
The victim's former foster mother also recounted her trauma, describing ongoing depression and anxiety stemming from Jeremiah's earlier inappropriate behavior. Her words underscore the long-lasting impact of predatory conduct and the ripple effects of justice system failures. Once Jeremiah Taylor was apprehended, Baton Rouge police began piecing together the timeline of events that led to the attack. Investigators focused on both the immediate crime and his prior history, noting the missed opportunities that could have prevented this incident. Officers examined surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts, and social media tips that placed Jeremiah near the victim's home in the hours before the assault. Every piece of information helped reconstruct the movements of a man who, in the eyes of the law, had already demonstrated a pattern of predatory behavior. Detectives also reached out to previous victims and their families to understand the broader pattern of his conduct, and they
A new arrest warrant for Jeremiah Taylor was filed today for a rape that occurred 3 years ago. Taylor was arrested last week for the rape of a 94-year-old in her driveway. Since then, other potential cases involving him are being re-examined. The WBRZ investigative unit has learned through DNA, and though it was collected from the victim in 2023, it was not tested until this week, where it came back to Taylor. Bess Casserly compiled a timeline of Taylor's criminal history.
Well, Michael, Sylvia, according to court records and District Attorney Hiller Moore, Taylor has been accused by at least 3 different women of sex crimes, one of them for multiple rapes police, and detectives are still investigating other complaints tied to him. During COVID in 2020, when Taylor was just 16 years old, he was arrested for battery on his foster mom.
Jeremiah just thought it was okay to do what he did, and once my mom asked him that particular night, why did he do that, he said that he wanted to see how a grown woman feels.
The rest of his juvenile arrest history is unknown, but the next time he's linked to a sexual assault, according to court records, is 3 years later in June. According to an arrest warrant, one of Taylor's family members claimed she was raped, but did not know by whom. Investigators collected DNA in that case, but the WBRZ investigative unit learned that DNA evidence wasn't processed through the state police crime lab until this week, and the evidence linked back to Taylor. On August 25th, 2024, at that same address, the same family member claims she was raped again and names Taylor. Baton Rouge police responded but could not locate him. The next day, court records showed Taylor comes back to the residence, the same victim again, and records video of it. Baton Rouge police arrest him 3 days later. That case is never prosecuted. District Attorney Hiller Moore says the case did not proceed because prosecutors could not locate the victim before trial. On January 13th, 2026, all charges against Taylor are dropped and he's released from jail. Less than 2 hours later, the same family member who he reportedly multiple times calls police. She reports that Taylor tried to get into her house despite an active protective order. Court records showed Taylor was not there when police arrived and he was never arrested. On February 10th, surveillance video catches Taylor seemingly stalking a woman in the same neighborhood where the previous rapes occurred.
He probably thought he was gonna grab me in this walkway in here.
Then on March 5th, he allegedly the 94-year-old woman who lives next door. Police arrest him the next day. For Taylor told us he asks that everyone remember that we're innocent until proven guilty. We're told a judge will appoint a sanity commission to assess Taylor tomorrow. For the investigative unit, Bess Casserly, WBRZ News 2.
Would find more chilling information. One woman who had known Jeremiah as a foster youth described harassment and abuse dating back to when he was 16. Her testimony revealed early warning signs that were not adequately addressed by the justice system. Law enforcement recognized that these gaps had allowed Jeremiah to remain a threat, culminating in the assault on a 94-year-old woman. But as police built their case, its implications for public safety became unsettlingly clear. Jeremiah's attack was brazen. It occurred in broad daylight in a quiet residential area, targeting someone nearly a 3/4 of a century older than himself. Investigators noted that there had been no prior relationship between Taylor and this elderly victim, marking the attack as both opportunistic and premeditated. Police reports highlighted that he had already violated a protective order involving a previous victim within hours of his release, signaling an escalating pattern of aggression and disregard for legal boundaries. But what was more unsettling was found on the reviewed video evidence. The footage captured Jeremiah stalking the victim. He was seen following her from a store to her residence, positioning himself in concealment behind vehicles before she entered her home safely. These images illustrated both the threat he posed and the premeditated nature of the crime. Law enforcement emphasized that had the victim not made it inside her home in time, the outcome could have been far worse.
Meanwhile, investigators worked to ensure that prior cases involving Jeremiah were revisited. Charges previously dismissed for lack of cooperation from witnesses were now being reconsidered, underscoring the broader implications of systemic gaps and missed opportunities to protect potential victims. But even with the legal system now engaged, the emotional and psychological toll on the victims and their families was just beginning. The 94-year-old victim was recovering in the hospital, her resilience remarkable given the severity of her injuries. She had sustained broken bones and trauma, yet she survived an attack that could have easily ended her life. Her story, coupled with the accounts of Taylor's former foster mother, highlighted a disturbing continuum of predatory behavior that had gone unchecked. Families and community members grappled with fear, outrage, and disbelief as they confronted the reality of someone exploiting both systemic and social vulnerabilities to commit violent acts. Public awareness were not left out. News outlets reported the details, emphasizing the severity of the assault and the failures that allowed it to occur. Residents expressed frustration, anger, and concern, some advocating for harsher penalties or even extreme measures for someone who targeted vulnerable members of the community. The case sparked discussions about elder safety, protective orders, and accountability in the justice system. Authorities continued to collect and review evidence, preparing for grand jury hearings and prosecution. Jeremiah's prior history, protective order violations, and surveillance footage were all critical components in presenting a compelling case for prosecution. The investigative team worked meticulously to ensure that every angle was covered, aware that the community's trust in law enforcement and the judicial system was at stake. Jeremiah's arrest, combined with the ongoing investigation into his prior offenses, highlighted the tension between legal procedure and public safety. Protective orders, prior arrests, and dismissed charges had created a loophole that allowed continued risk, and the community's response underscored the need for reform, attention, and proactive protection measures for the elderly and other vulnerable populations. The story of Jeremiah Taylor isn't the first of its kind. Baton Rouge has seen this kind of horror before. More than 2 decades earlier, the city was gripped by fear as another predator stalked women across the region. His name was Derek Todd Lee, and unlike Jeremiah, his crimes spanned years, leaving a trail of victims and unanswered questions before investigators finally pieced together the truth. 47-year-old Derek Todd Lee's name is etched into Louisiana's criminal history as one of its most notorious serial killers. Born in St. Francisville, Louisiana in 1968, Lee grew up in a troubled environment marked by instability and violence. From an early age, he displayed antisocial behavior, including stalking women and peeping into their homes. Just like Jeremiah, these early warning signs would foreshadow the predatory tendencies that would later define his adult life. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Baton Rouge and surrounding parishes began experiencing a disturbing pattern of murders. Women were being found brutally killed, often in or near their homes. The victims were predominantly women living alone, and the attacks bore signs of sexual violence. For years, law enforcement struggled to connect the dots as the murders spanned multiple jurisdictions and lacked a clear suspect. Fear spread throughout Baton Rouge, with women altering their routines, installing security systems, and living under constant anxiety. Derek's criminal record prior to the murders included arrests for stalking, burglary, and domestic violence. Despite these red flags, he managed to evade serious consequences. This allowed him to continue his predatory behavior unchecked. Between 1998 and 2003, Derek is believed to have murdered at least 7 women, though investigators suspect the true number may be higher. His known victims included Geraldine DeSoto, Charlotte Murray Pace, Pam Kinnamore, and Trinisha Dene Colombe, among others. Each case carried similarities: forced entry, sexual assault, and extreme violence. The investigation into the Baton Rouge murders was complicated by jurisdictional divides and initial missteps. For a time, authorities believed the killer was white, based on eyewitness accounts and profiling. This assumption delayed progress, as Derek, a black man, was overlooked. It wasn't until DNA evidence was properly analyzed and matched to Lee that the investigation gained traction. In 2003, police finally identified Derek Todd Lee as the prime suspect. Derek fled Louisiana once his identity became public, but he was eventually captured in Atlanta, Georgia. His arrest brought relief to Baton Rouge, but also raised questions about how he had been able to operate for so long, despite prior arrests and behavioral warnings.
Defense attorneys are trying to spare Derek Lee's life by putting on the stand some of his family members in hopes jurors will have sympathy. But most importantly, defense attorneys say they will soon produce evidence that shows Derek Lee is mentally retarded, which means by law he cannot be sentenced. Derek Lee's attorneys are fighting to spare him from the penalty, which he could be sentenced to for murdering Murray Pace. The defense says they have evidence Lee is mentally retarded, which means under a Supreme Court ruling, he cannot be executed.
80% of people that suffer from mental retardation fall in the mild mental retardation category. They can function, they can work. It is something that I previously did not know. Embarrassingly, I did not know that.
The prosecution will counter defense claims with their own expert testimony, and ultimately jurors will decide if Lee is mentally handicapped or not.
This is first time under the new law, but in every capital case I've ever prosecuted in my life, there's been mental health experts either saying not guilty by reason of insanity or saying diminished capacity under mitigating circumstances. It's just a new version of the same old thing that we've faced hundreds of times.
The defense put on the stand Lee's sister, Tasha Fontenot. She apologized to victims' family members, but said her brother has good qualities and has 3 children. She stated, quote, "Derek, he's still my brother, and he's been there for me, and I miss him." Murray Pace's family members also had a chance to speak and brought practically the entire courtroom to tears as they spoke about their love for Murray and how her death affected them.
I hope they'll remember the pictures they saw, remember the descriptions we gave, and take that with them to deliberate, because if they do, I do not see how they could possibly return a verdict other than death.
During his trial, prosecutors presented DNA evidence linking him to multiple murders. The brutality of his crimes and the sheer number of victims shocked the community. In 2004, Derek was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of Geraldine DeSoto and later sentenced to death for the murder of Charlotte Murray Pace. While on death row at Louisiana State Penitentiary, Lee's health deteriorated. In January 2016, he died of heart disease at the age of 47, never facing full accountability for all the murders attributed to him. For many families, his death closed the chapter without delivering complete justice, as unanswered questions about additional victims remained. The case of Derek Todd Lee left a lasting impact on Baton Rouge. It exposed flaws in investigatory coordination, highlighted the dangers of racial bias in profiling, and underscored the importance of DNA technology in solving crimes. Jeremiah Taylor's case in 2026 echoes the same themes that haunted Baton Rouge during Derek Todd Lee's reign of terror. Early warning signs ignored, prior arrests dismissed, and a justice system struggling to contain dangerous offenders. Both stories serve as stark reminders that when red flags are overlooked, communities are left exposed to unimaginable violence. With Jeremiah Taylor in custody, the focus shifted to the emotional and legal aftermath. The 94-year-old victim, though physically recovering, now faced the psychological trauma of an attack in her own home, a place that had once been her sanctuary. For the elderly victim, recovery extended beyond physical healing. Counseling, support from family and neighbors, and public awareness of her ordeal were essential. Community leaders highlighted the need for vigilance, reminding residents to check in on vulnerable neighbors and to advocate for stronger enforcement of protective measures. Families, neighbors, and the community rallied around her, offering support, counseling, and reassurance. Yet, even with this care, the emotional scars would last a lifetime, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of the elderly and the consequences when protection fails. Baton Rouge had witnessed a crime that exposed both individual malice and systemic weaknesses, prompting renewed attention to elder protection and reporting mechanisms. While the court proceedings had not yet been finalized, the court ensured Taylor remained incarcerated, held without bond, as investigators and prosecutors prepared for potential trial or plea negotiations. Every procedural step emphasized both the seriousness of the crimes and the necessity of preventing further harm. Ultimately, Jeremiah Taylor's case stands as a stark reminder of the intersection between individual choices and systemic responsibility. The 94-year-old victim survived, but her experience exposed gaps in protective measures and the devastating potential of ignoring early warning signs. Families, neighbors, and the community were reminded that vigilance, intervention, and reporting are essential. Jeremiah Taylor's story is not just a chronicle of one violent act. It is a cautionary tale of vulnerability, systemic gaps, and the consequences of inaction. The March attack on a 94-year-old woman was the tragic culmination of years of concerning behavior, highlighting the urgent need for vigilance, reporting, and intervention at every stage. If you see signs of abuse, neglect, or predatory behavior, whether against children, the elderly, or vulnerable individuals, act immediately. Call law enforcement, report concerns, and advocate for protective measures. Silence can allow harm to escalate. Share stories like this to raise awareness, educate your community, and prevent future tragedies. Jeremiah Taylor's actions have left a permanent mark on his victims and the Baton Rouge community, but through vigilance, awareness, and accountability, further harm can be prevented. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below, and if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.